Okay, one of the important things to think about when we're thinking about how media operates in terms of being a socializing agent, think back to one of our first chapters. I think it was maybe chapter two, chapter three, where it listed the 8 different socializing agents in society. Media was one of those. I called it out at the time, but I want to specify again and go into a little bit more depth on the way in which media is unique in terms of being a socializing agent. What are our socializing agents? Once again, these are things like family and community structures and peers and institutional authorities. Um, all of our other socializing agents in our society, in any society, function with the primary purpose of teaching people how to be the right kind of person, how to be a proactive and productive member of their particular society. So your parents are telling you how to behave because they want you to get along, they want you to have friends, they want you to not embarrass them. All of these are socializing ends. They serve to the reason that these socialization messages are being passed on is with the purpose of helping the child, the adolescent, grow and become a useful member of society. With media, while there is an equal amount of socialization messages embedded in media communications compared to parental communications or anything else, the purpose for the existence of this socialization source is different from all of the others. Our other socialization sources exist to help the person grow and be the right kind of person. Media exists to make money. So that's a basic difference in terms of why it exists and what it is there for that causes it to behave differently than our other sources of socialization. Um, Media, despite the fact that it is the primary purpose of media is not to say here's how you ought to be, but rather please watch this so that you can end up watching commercials so that I can make money. Right? This was one of the deep disappointments of my life when I realized that all of my favorite television shows existed merely to keep my eyeballs occupied until they could show me more soap commercials. That is the only reason that most of our media exists. Now, there are other models, of course, with Netflix and whatever else. Nevertheless, uh, it exists to make money. And so it is going to be more careful about the socialization messages that it presents because it does not want to offend. An offended person is someone who stops watching. And so the socialization messages in most of our media tend to be pretty safe in nature, pretty well within the mainstream. Now, there are perhaps some exceptions to this, but overall, a television show, a radio show, music, all of it is only going to be successful if it resonates with the attitudes and beliefs and value systems that already exist within the culture. Otherwise, everybody's like, this is garbage, and turns it off, and then they don't make any money, and it doesn't get produced anymore. And it certainly doesn't get shown, right? So, media polices itself very carefully to appear to be forward thinking and edgy and giving you something that you're not going to get somewhere else, while actually couching things in such a way as to not offend their audience. Right now, there can be more than one audience, of course. So the media that is geared towards teens is happy to offend parents and grandparents because those aren't the people that are they that they want to have watching. They pick their particular commercials that are going to be geared towards teens, and so they present shows that teens are going to want to watch. And maybe they don't even necessarily want mom and dad watching. They want this to be, something that mom and dad aren't paying attention to. Um, Teens are very sensitive to this and tend to gravitate toward uh, media sources that are designed for them, that are designed with principal characters that are their age or close to their age, and that are behaving in ways that they either would like to behave or think they ought to be behaving. Um, like we said, we are active in our media choices, and so when it comes to media, teens can tune out a lot of the socialization that they don't want and pick the socialization that they do want in a way that you can't when it comes to family socialization or governmental control or institutional influence. You don't get to pick what your government tells you, what mom and dad tell you, but you do get to pick what you're watching on TV. And so you have more control over your own socialization. And the producers of media content are very aware of that, and so calibrate their messaging very carefully so that they can appear to be cool and something that teens are going to want to pay attention to. At the same time, this is likely to create, likely to involve language and slang and presentation that is off-putting to adults because it isn't geared toward them. And so, also, this is a feature, not a bug. Parents don't pay as good attention to the messaging that comes through media in terms of what their teens are wanting to watch compared to a lot of other sources because they're turned off by it, right? They don't want to pay attention to it. They're like, that's you guys' thing. I don't like that kind of music. I don't like that kind of show. You go ahead and watch it. I'll do something else, right? And so a lot of the messages get in unfiltered through parental control. The media tries to present itself as what we call the super peer, where media would really like you to believe, all of us, right, that this is information that is being presented by somebody who is just like us, except more attractive and cooler, with more money and better clothes, right? That is what media would really like it to present itself to be. And when you look at media that way, it becomes glaringly obvious and almost offensive when you realize how much your media panders to the tastes it presumes you to have, right? Watch media that is geared towards 60 and 70-year-olds, and all of the people that are presented that are their age are going to be very fit and in charge of their own lives and at the top of their games and are able to show up the younger folks around them because that's what everybody would like at that age. And so it's really fun to watch somebody else do that and pretend that maybe at some point you could do it too. And so this very much is the case when it comes to media presented towards or geared towards teenagers. It tries to present itself as the coolest kid that you know. So you really ought to listen and pay attention because it's going to tell you how to behave and the right way to be, right? This it tries to be a super peer in terms of not only being cooler than you, but also knowing more than you. So it is presenting you with information. And a lot of our media sources are very savvy about that positioning and use it to try and push their own agendas about how they think society ought to look. Now, there's this tension then, right, between we don't want to offend because people will turn off the TV, but at the same time, we want to tell you exactly how to be the right kind of person. And here's how I think. Here's what I think the right kind of person looks like. But probably the person who is writing the lines for that super cool teenager is like 47 and stuck in a writer's office somewhere in Hollywood and probably has a very different view of life than the teens for whom they are writing. And so you get these sort of complicated interactions in terms of the influence that media can have on teens because, like I said, it has a different purpose than any of our other socialization sources. It wants to take your money. Okay, now, as a result, we're not dummies. We know this. This is not news, even though we may forget about it sometimes, not think about it very clearly. And so parents and authority figures of all stripes have, with every single type of media, at one point or another said, you shouldn't be watching this. This is not appropriate for you. This is not sending the right messages. Now, having authority figures say that to adolescents just makes it more enticing to watch that particular bit of media for teens. That's just the way it works. However, there are in different parts of the world, in different cultures, different kinds and types of restrictions on what you can watch and what you can consume when it comes to media. It's worth recognizing that here in the United States, the controls and restrictions that we have are almost all in place due to the industry policing itself. Because what happens pretty much every time some new sort of media shows up is that the people in charge of producing that media push the boundaries, start to get in trouble with parents and with politicians and things like that, and then go, hang on, rather than letting the government tell us what we can and can't do and then making laws and then we're stuck, how about let's get ahead of this and let's make our own policing structures where we create some sort of rating system or some sort of restrictions on who can watch what. And then we're in charge of it, and then Uncle Sam can't tell us what to do, because then we can say, look, we're already doing it. Hands off, right? So when you think about pretty much all of the media restrictions that we have in our society, think of like movie ratings, for instance. Those are not presented by or given by any sort of governmental body. That those ratings are created by the Motion Picture Association of America, which is controlled and owned by the big movie studios in Hollywood, and they give the movies a rating and say these kids of this age can't watch this show because it's too mature, and they do that in order to protect themselves, right? And keep parents off of their back. And that's the same thing has happened with comic books and with radio and with cable and all of it, right? And so you don't find many media controls or governmental media controls here in the United States, but in certain other locations in the world, there are lots of them, right? Think about some of the places. So in China, for instance, you're not allowed to access Facebook or Twitter or a lot of other social media platforms. The Chinese government has created their own versions of those social media platforms that they are in control of and can police and control. And unless you know your way around a computer and know how to use a VPN, you're stuck with those state-controlled options in those particular places, right? So that's governmental control, where you can do this, you can't do that, you're going to get in trouble, right? Now, this all sounds very Big Brother-ish, and in some cases it can be, but most of it stems from a genuine concern for adolescents and not putting them in situations that they don't know how to cope with, or presenting them with options that they don't have the wisdom or control yet to manage, which is not in and of itself a bad idea. And so every person themselves, when it comes to managing their own family, has to figure out sort of what the boundaries are going to be for themselves and also for their own children when it comes to media consumption of books and movies and music and games and all of that stuff. And if you want to go online in parenting forums, folks will argue endlessly about this garbage. I'm of a mind that you get to choose this for yourself, right? And nobody else really gets to tell you that you're wrong. The shows that I let my kids watch or don't let my kids watch, that's on me. And if you don't like it, get lost and shut up. I don't care. They're my kids. And more power to you if you have a different idea. You tell your own kids what they can and can't do, what they can and can't watch. This is how it works, right? At least in our society. And so it's worth thinking about this for yourself. What restrictions do we have? Like I said, we don't have many governmental ones, but we do have a lot of industry controls over our media. And are they working? Are they accurate? Now, especially when you come to movie ratings, those are ridiculous when it comes to the accuracy of those ratings and how effective those are at actually controlling who watches those films. pretty toothless, actually, and pretty ridiculous when it comes to the rating system itself. Um, and certainly that could be improved. Are we going to bother? Probably not. Not unless it starts to cause some real problems in our society, which it hasn't so far, at least not that we've been able to identify. And so you put the control programs in place that work for that particular place, for that particular culture. And so long as it doesn't cause too many problems, you just sort of roll with it. And at least within cultures like ours, where there's a decent amount of free choice, you get to have quite a bit of personal choice in terms of how that ends up looking for your own family. Okay.